Putin's spring offensive is not going according to plan. What was supposed to be Russia's final push to seize the Donbass has turned into something completely different. Ukraine is taking everything back. April 2026 marked Russia's first net territorial loss since August 2024. While Putin expected decisive advances, his soldiers are retreating. The de-Russification of Ukraine is happening at a rate of nearly 4 square kilometers per day. April's numbers are in and they look terrible for Putin. Ukraine outpaced Russia by 116 square kilometers of recovered territory. According to the Institute for the Study of War, that represents 44.7 square miles of liberated Ukrainian land. To put this reversal into perspective, in March 2025, Russian forces were capturing around 12.9 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory per day. Today, 2 days of fighting in March of last year would have yielded more territory for Russia than an entire month of combat in March 2026. The situation deteriorated rapidly for Moscow. March 2026 saw Russia achieve virtually zero net gains in 31 days of fighting. The Institute reports that Russia managed to seize only 23 square kilometers of Ukraine in March, and it appears likely that it lost all of that territory and even more in April. This is a complete shift in operational momentum, happening at the worst possible moment for Putin. In contrast to the current figures, March 2025 showed Russian forces capturing Ukrainian territory daily. The difference is striking. We are witnessing a total reversal of momentum that caught everyone by surprise except Ukraine, which had been preparing for this since the beginning. Russian losses are staggering. March set catastrophic records, as revealed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Putin lost 35,351 soldiers for virtually no gains in March. That represents more than 350 soldiers above the 35,000 casualties suffered in December 2025, which previously held the grimmest record of the war. April's figures are still being tabulated by Ukraine, but if April 29th is any indication, we will see something similar accompanying Russia's first net territorial loss in nearly 2 years. On that day, Russia lost 1,470 soldiers, according to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. Multiplying that number by 30 gives a monthly total of 44,100 casualties. Ukraine's counteroffensive is not taking empty land or meaningless territory. The Ukrainian advance is measured, precise, and aimed at key locations that disrupt Russian logistics and maneuvers across the front. Ukraine's gains in April were not an isolated event. They are part of the pattern that has defined all of 2026. Russia boasts, but Ukraine is the one making all the positive moves on the battlefield. 2026 is exposing Putin's strategic incompetence. We are seeing a broad slowdown in the Russian offensive across the entire front line. This slowdown has been building for a long time. The rate of Russian battlefield advances has been steadily declining since November 2025. As ongoing Ukrainian ground counterattacks, Ukrainian medium-range strikes, the February 2026 blocking of Russian use of Starlink terminals in Ukraine, and the Kremlin's crackdown on Telegram exacerbated existing problems within the Russian military. We have seen this slowdown in real time. In November 2025, Russia was slow but still managed to seize around 575 square kilometers of Ukraine. December saw a drop of around 40 to 50 square kilometers. Since then, Russian progress has been in freefall in terms of monthly figures, all leading up to April 2026 and its first net territorial loss since August 2024. A major reason why this is happening is that Russia simply failed to adapt to conditions on the ground in Ukraine. The winter of 2025 into 2026 was slightly colder and significantly wetter than the previous winter, resulting in exceptionally muddy March and April conditions, as a combination of spring rains and thawing soil created a kind of swamp-like terrain. Russia responded in the only way Putin knows, by throwing more flesh and metal into Ukraine. It is going about as well as you might imagine. Tanks and armored vehicles can barely move through the slippery Ukrainian soil, which has prevented Russia from providing fire support to its soldiers or protection to those being sent into assaults. When mud traps an armored vehicle, a Russian soldier is not instructed to retreat until conditions improve. They leave their vehicles and march through the mud until a Ukrainian drone inevitably finds and eliminates them. It is the same old Putin story we have seen throughout the war. Human wave assaults supported by artillery and glide bombs appear to be all Russia truly has in its arsenal, and the strategy is becoming increasingly ineffective as Ukraine's drone-infested kill zones continue to expand. The real problem for Russia is that it cannot keep up with what it is trying to do in Ukraine right now, and that is a key reason why de-Russification is progressing so effectively. Lies spread by its generals and a declining appetite for war within the country are combining to frustrate Putin's plans. Russian generals are trying to hide everything that is happening. They have created an alternate reality where Russia is on the rise. And the craziest thing about it is that Putin probably believes them. The Russian president is a man who punishes those who tell him things he does not want to hear, which has resulted in the creation of a circle of loyalists who lie to him simply to ensure they are not the next associate to mysteriously fall from a Russian window. Chief among the Russian propagandists is Valery Gerasimov, who serves as chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces. On April 21st, Gerasimov claimed that Russia had taken control of 80 Ukrainian settlements and 1,700 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. March and April certainly were not months of zero gains followed by severe net losses, Gerasimov added. 34 Ukrainian settlements and 700 square kilometers had allegedly been captured during the early months of Russia's spring offensive. Russia's chief of the General Staff was lying. Putin will gladly sink deeper into the alternate reality his generals are creating because what is actually happening is far from what he wants to hear. Net territorial losses and the de-Russification of so much Ukrainian territory are bad enough. But think about what Putin's outdated tactics require to have any chance of success. Manpower. You cannot have a meat grinder strategy if you do not have meat to feed the grinder. On top of everything else going wrong for Russia right now, the fact that it is not recruiting enough soldiers to sustain the spring offensive that is already collapsing may be the worst problem of all. The United Kingdom's Ministry of Defense has already highlighted what is happening on the Russian recruitment front, saying that March marked the fourth consecutive month in which Russia lost more soldiers than it managed to recruit. Russia plans to recruit 409,000 contract soldiers by the end of 2026, but it is nowhere close to reaching that target. Russia is recruiting an average of 1,120 soldiers per day, which is barely covering a daily casualty rate that typically ranges between 1,000 and 1,200 and, as we saw on April 29th, can climb much higher. At its current recruitment rate, Russia will fall short of its goal by thousands of soldiers before the end of 2026. Meanwhile, Ukraine is not slowing down. Ukrainian Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov set a target of 50,000 Russian casualties per month by the end of 2026. If Ukraine reaches that goal, Russia's faltering recruitment efforts will be compounded by even heavier battlefield losses. The Russian army is growing weaker in other ways as well. Putin does not look for talent when appointing generals. He looks for obedience combined with a willingness to be as corrupt as necessary to survive within the distorted structure of the Russian military. That incompetence filters down to soldiers on the ground. Ivan, a Russian conscript who ended up being sent to the front, outlined Russia's training process for new recruits. After all the medical exams, they asked if I was ready to go to the military base the next day. They trained us for 5 days, waited another 5 days for a troop rotation, and then we were sent into combat positions. Medical exam plus 10 days of preparation. That is what a Russian soldier receives before being thrown onto the front lines to try to achieve the gains Putin wants. But while Putin sinks deeper into the lies told by his generals and the continued weakening of his military, Russia is losing ground in Ukraine. Of course, it is not just Russian incompetence playing a role here. Ukraine is doing more than its share when it comes to taking advantage of the situation before it and adapting its tactics to achieve the de-Russification of so much of its territory. 3 major strengths stand out in Ukraine's military campaign: drones, the ground offensive, and exploiting Russia's communications problems. Drones are the key to everything for Ukraine. Specifically, Ukraine has added medium-range drones to its arsenal in recent months, and they are having a devastating effect. These drones, which fly farther than frontline FPV drones but cost less and lack the range of long-range drones being launched into Russia, are devastating Putin's rear areas. Flying up to 200 kilometers behind the Russian front, these drones are crushing Russian logistics and destroying air defenses, the latter opening the door for deeper strikes further behind enemy lines. Russia's supplies are being delayed or destroyed. Command posts are falling to these drones, and the effect on the front line is clear as an already dysfunctional military becomes even more fractured. Attacks against Russian air defenses in occupied territories also open the door for long-range drones to eliminate Russian military and oil infrastructure, which further weakens Putin's forces. Add Ukraine's FPV drones and ground robots operating along the front line into the mix, and you get a lethal combination. 96% of Russian casualties are now reportedly being inflicted by drones. That is tens of thousands of Russians eliminated every month without even having a chance to fight an actual Ukrainian soldier. It is flesh versus machine, and there is only going to be one winner in that kind of battle. Ukraine's kill zones extend deeper and wider than ever before, and Russia is breaking its own teeth against them. Not that Ukrainian soldiers are doing nothing. When mechanized assaults get bogged down in Ukrainian mud, Putin resorts to sending small infiltration units behind Ukrainian lines. These units are vital to Russian propaganda. People like Gerasimov inflate their numbers by counting territory where 1 or 2 Russian soldiers are desperately hiding while waiting for reinforcements as captured. Ukraine adapted to those tactics and created search and destroy units operating in gray zones to eliminate Russian infiltrators. These units are being supported by Ukraine's medium-range strikes. If Russia is being destroyed in the rear, it cannot send the supplies and troops needed to build on whatever its infiltrators achieve. So the infiltrators are eliminated before ever receiving the support they were supposed to get. There is also Russia's communications crisis. It has been a nightmare ever since SpaceX cut Russian access to Starlink, which Putin's forces had been using through illicit terminals. Following that cutoff, Starlink data traffic reportedly dropped by an astonishing 75%. More than any other statistic that shows how dependent Russia had become on the technology. Now it is gone, mostly. Some Russian units can still get their hands on functioning Starlink terminals. But, like the Russian military itself, that access is fragmented and nowhere near widespread enough to be effective outside isolated pockets of the front line. Add Putin's campaign against Telegram into the mix, and Russian soldiers are left without modern communication options and nothing to replace them. This brings us to the 4th major strength in Ukraine's offensive campaign that is producing the kinds of results seen in April: active defense. This is Ukraine's new strategy for 2026, and it amounts to using precision to exploit Russian weakness. Everything Ukraine does forces Russia to react, shift reserves, and make changes to its approach that are not happening fast enough. Gaps are being created for Ukraine to exploit. Ukraine stubbornly defends where it must and attacks Russia where Putin's forces are weakest and least prepared. Ukraine is strengthening this strategy by taking the opposite approach from Russia in terms of military structure. As the Russian military becomes more fractured and places less emphasis on training, Ukraine is increasing training time and reorganizing its military to ensure unit cohesion. Ukraine is also reducing its dependence on military aid by building a thriving defense industry focused on producing the equipment needed to execute its strategy. We are not seeing a massive, sweeping Ukrainian counteroffensive. That is not what active defense is about. What we see on the battlefield is a series of calculated attacks, whether through medium-range drone strikes behind Russian lines, long-range drone attacks inside Russia itself, or troops on the ground eliminating Russian positions, all of which create a cumulative effect. The Russian military is being constantly disrupted and thrown off balance. Ukraine is hitting all the right pressure points, and it will only improve as its units become more cohesive on the battlefield. The early results are already visible. Russia is dealing with record losses and its first net territorial loss in nearly 2 years. Putin does not realize it yet, but Russia is losing the war. The tide has turned, as the man who can do nothing except rely on tactics that clearly no longer work has no answer for Ukraine. There will be more drones, more death, more losses. Even the warmer months at the end of spring and throughout the summer will not save Russia now, as the de-Russification of Ukraine is underway. The Russian military is being systematically dismantled, and the spring offensive collapsed in record time. And somehow, things are getting even worse for Putin. While liberating territory on the mainland remains Ukraine's priority, it has not forgotten Crimea. Illegally occupied since 2014, the peninsula is undergoing its own long-term de-Russification. Ukraine is isolating Crimea. It is targeting supply lines, ships, military equipment, and logistics centers, all in preparation for destroying the one thing that allows Putin to maintain control over the peninsula. De-Russification is not just a military strategy. It is the process of systematically reclaiming every piece of Ukrainian soil illegally occupied.